I find that the work, Richard, that you've done in the mental health field is one that is a very important issue today because there's so much neglect that's been happening with young people, with adults, whatever. I'd like to get on to one other quick subject since you are a therapist. I know you're not a psychiatrist.
No.
What are the meds doing? Are they helping in most cases when you're dealing with people, or what do you think? Because
my own personal opinion is that they're overprescribed. My brother was in a serious motorcycle accident a couple of years ago, and while he was in rehab, they determined that he had bipolar 2. He doesn't meet the criteria for that at all. It was used more as chemical restraints because he was so out of control emotionally with what had happened to him that they just said, okay, bipolar 2. They put him on Seroquel, lithium, I mean, all this stuff. And he was basically chemical restraints. The side effects to meds are also quite awful. My daughter was diagnosed with severe depression a few years ago. And, you know, we see people out and about who are very, very heavy, you know, weight-wise and all that. Well, it's one of the side effects of almost all antidepressants, that no matter what you do, you're going to put on enormous weight. Then add to the fact that you're poor and you can't afford to buy good food. You know, it's easier when you're raising a kid by yourself to buy 10 little Totino's pizzas, right? And so you're eating junk food with the meds. Personally, the whole realm of prescribing meds constantly was more about efficiency and cost cutting rather than actual treatment. For instance, a psychiatrist can make 4 times as much money per hour if he sees 4 people an hour at 15 minutes a pop just to do med management than to do an hour of actual psychotherapy.
Yes, and it's disgusting.
My phrase is that we gave up character building for the sake of cost cutting, because ultimately what therapy is about, if you're really doing the work, it's about character building. It's about getting to the core of who I am and what am I doing on this planet and how to be more alive, right? It's not about, oh, let me take a pill and you know, it's all better now. No, well, I spent 13 years in therapy with the same guy, starting in the late 80s. I grew up in an enormously violent home. If I were a child today and my parents were doing that, they would both be in prison. So I had all this stuff, and taking a pill, I can't imagine what sort of human being I'd be today if back in 1982 or whenever I first started doing therapy, there was just, here, take a pill. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, the other thing with the pills, we know that what happens to the person is that they start losing, they get more disassociative because it's numbing them out. And one of the researches that we've done, I say we've done it with experts by interviewing them, is that there's underlying causes.
Absolutely.
It could be diabetes and the person showing symptoms of psychosis, Lyme disease, it goes on and on the list.
Right, especially in older folks. One of the most common things when we would get called out to nursing homes because somebody's with dementia or out of control, we would require them to do a full med workup on them before we came out, because something as simple as a urinary tract infection causes psychosis in seniors. 10 to 14 days on antibiotics, they're all cleared up. It's not a psychiatric illness at all. Yeah, so that's what you're talking about, that idea. Yeah.
And the teenagers.
Yeah.
I work with people too in a particular way because I've written 8 books. You may or may not know anything about me, but I was a television star and I had a big breadth of experience in the world.
Right.
And I saw young people early on, even in my career, that were, you know, taking drugs, acting bizarre, and then get medicated, or being diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, starting them on drugs at 2 years old.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a drug addict.
Yes.
What did they think? What are we thinking?
No doubt. So let me just give you a real brief scenario of what it was like when I very first began mental health treatment before all the crazy cuts started. Mary Lynn comes to my office. She doesn't have insurance. She's working part-time. She's depressed. Our intake form was 1 page, front and back. I would, demographic information, presenting problem. I would do a genogram, so on and so forth. You don't have any insurance. We have sliding fee scale. I would base your income and say, well, is $10 a session something that you can afford? And we would work it out, and we could work as long as we needed to. The average length of time I worked with somebody was around 3 years.
Wow.
That's gone. That does not exist anymore. Today, an intake form at a mental health center is between 25 and 30 pages long. The clinician is spending all this time filling out paperwork. Screw building rapport. It'd be like, okay, Mary Lynn, I just met you. What's your sexual orientation? I mean, how do you start off building rapport that way? But these are the forms, and you go down the form, you have to check the box. So the whole thing is upside down from the original method, because I believe that the primary issues, people have characterological development issues, personality disorders, if you will. It's, we learn behaviors as a young person in order to survive. We continue those behaviors into adulthood. They don't work anymore. So we need to change those. To just put a pill on top of that doesn't work. Now, people can develop depressions and anxieties as a result of the personality disorder, the underlying causes, as you said, but research that, as far as I understand it, it's a combination of talk therapy and meds that work best. Personally, I prefer to start with talk and see if it works.
Mm-hmm. What about energetic work? There's some things that are, well, maybe as a therapist, you've done some non-traditional methodologies, somatic work, the body plays into it, that the spirit of a person, the young people, has been wiped out, a society that just starts pounding them right from the beginning.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so they've really lost a sense of just having gravity, being grounded. And it's not so esoteric, it's just common sense.
Sure. I never did anything specific that way. My background, I was trained, I call myself a Jungian-oriented psychotherapist. So I rooted a lot of my work in Jung's work and also James Hillman. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's called the father of archetypal psychology. But I write poetry and I make art. So I included art therapy in my work. I used to do mask making with clients. I would do something like we would make a mask, paint the outside, for instance, to represent what the world sees. Now paint the inside, what you're hiding. So I would engage them in body work, if you will, in the sense of accessing imagination, accessing the dream world, accessing the spirit world, if you want to call it that.
Well, that is it. I mean, it's a technology of going beyond the analytical mind.
Right.
And the subconscious is one aspect, but the superconscious, which you're talking about, the artwork comes from another place, not what we're programmed with.
Absolutely.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
You and I could go on and on.
Yes, we probably could.
What else would you like to tell us? What the audience is listening now, and maybe they have a teenager who's really on the brink. They don't know what to do. They started medication, then they stopped because the kid wouldn't take it anymore. What are we going to do with these kids that are not quite over the edge?
Right.
Where should these parents who are so anxious, what should they do right now?
I don't have any easy answers for that. I mean, to me, my first instinct is, my wife and I were talking about this today, how communities have been destroyed. The old neighborhoods, I mean, they were, back in the 50s, freeways went right through, like right here in Olympia. Downtown Tumwater was obliterated. So the idea of neighbors knowing each other, having places to go, I did men's work for a lot of years back in the 80s and early 90s with Robert Bly and James Hillman and Michael Mead and those guys. And they talked a lot about that for instance, the relationship between father and son is fraught with all sorts of danger. So boys need older, unrelated males in their lives. I was fortunate that throughout my entire life, I sought out people. My best friend, if you want to call him a mentor, surrogate dad, is 17 years older than me. I've known him for 30 years. So I always had somebody kind of blazing the path ahead. A lot of young people don't have that. And the other thing that's different is young people don't seek it out as much. I wanted to have that in my life when I was growing up.
Well, we're going to see an escalation of not seeking it out when communication is today texting. They don't even call each other.
Right.
And they go out for lunch and they're all still texting.
Oh, absolutely.
That is major dissociation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And here we are, we're communicating this way, but you are comfortable in your own skin.
Yes, I love myself.
Yes, and that permeates. And I think you're a therapist. You might guess that I'm sort of comfortable in my skin too.
Yes.
How do we get someone who isn't? I do meditation, for instance. I do a lot of different techniques. I love nature.
Right.
And what do you recommend?
Try in my own work. And my favorite client to work with is a dad who's like 20 to 27 years old. You know, and that young, really kind of waking up for men. Men usually don't wake up until they're about 27 to 30 years old. I love working with them in an effort to be a mentor, to show them that there are ways to make it through this world. But the willingness doesn't seem to be there. I mean, there are so many groups out there. I mean, people get that connection through 12-step meetings. I think there are some church groups. People find that connection. Helping them to write their own stories and then publicly perform them. You know, so poems or short stories, and then get up and read it. And that's the whole thing. It's like, when I learned as a young person to let some of this stuff out, it's like, then I started to blossom.
Yes, and then you find out you're not the only one.
Exactly.
You live in this vacuum, we do. Right. Well, this is very wonderful. Richard, I would like to invite you. Again, I'm still pumping you for more because you've got gold there to give. To come again to our show. We can get some kids online in a Google Hangout.
I'm just going to say, see you later, Richard. Sun is up. Happy, happy, happy day. Love.